YouTube will not close down. It will be just fine. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and while I'm still completely afraid of what is going to happen to the platform because the theories put forward from people like Computing Forever are quite logical and thorough, I am going to offer a counter theory because something just doesn't quite make sense to me. Now, I completely understand people's concerns. There's been a bunch of fuckery going on, and I will be the first to tell you that I am positive that I've been dicked around a little bit by the algorithm changes, the unsubscribe thing, having basically not a single one of my videos show up on restricted mode, and maybe some other stuff. However, the main thing I am thinking is this. YouTube and Google aren't as stupid as their actions might appear to be from the outside. Ultimately, if they want to suppress a certain type of political opinion, it's kind of too late for that by maybe, 3 years? When exactly did Gamergate start again? The damage has pretty clearly, mostly already been done. And in terms of political meddling with media, the worst case scenarios already happened for the political bias that Google seems to have, which was Brexit and Trump. Those elections are over. So what is the point in silencing people who were simply following what popular opinion seems to be? What point is there in silencing those opposed to these regressive leftist social justice warrior proponents? Some would call them even globalists or what have you. They're losing, and they have to know it by now. Way too many people have been thoroughly red-pilled for it to be a good idea to try to wipe culture clean of all of us. And not even the stupidest, most power-hungry tyrant of a leader would attempt to silence a populace with the majority opinion being what it clearly is. But granted, for all we know, Hillary Clinton and the rest of Democratic Party Incorporated was ready to silence people by any means necessary if she rose to power. But that seemingly is precisely why she lost. That said, from my understanding of both Google and its affiliates, as well as the rest of mainstream media, there was never a plan B in regards to what would happen if Hillary Clinton lost the election. I like to imagine, dramatically, a meeting where some company was talking about censoring media to make sure Clinton was promised the victory, and somebody asked what would happen if she lost. And that person got shot in the head for merely asking the question. If you watched this election closely, it seemed like such things practically might have happened. But here's what I am optimistically thinking is really happening, just because I can't make the puzzle pieces fit together in any other way. The first thing to keep in mind is that YouTube has not been a profitable business for a while, and I think it hasn't ever been, which prior to the election meant that it was more or less expendable to Google, and maybe even inconvenient. There were politically inconvenient channels that had been speaking truth to power for many years, and during the election, the corporate Democrats with Clinton's campaign began nudging YouTube to slyly sabotage certain channels as if people wouldn't notice. And also, the unsubscribe bug that seemingly has hit everybody at least at some point was introduced. I think that instead of the sabotaging being entirely political like some people think, it was probably only partially political, but also just a way to discourage microchannels from uploading content, because over 90% of the channels that exist have 100 subscribers or less, and if enough of those channels were gone, YouTube could maybe become a profitable company because it wouldn't waste so many resources. That all said, the plan prior to the election was probably to slowly bleed out the smaller channels, as well as the politically inconvenient channels. And then when Clinton came into power, they could take out the politically inconvenient channels one by one for various forms of hate speech or whatever. And since mainstream media would be on their side, as well as the seeming public opinion, nobody would listen to Paul Joseph Watson scream about being silenced for wrong think. At which point, YouTube would massively just have shrunk, which is what they probably wanted, so that they could get it to the point where it was using a lot less memory and bandwidth. Furthermore, by getting rid of the hate speech channels, they would have also made it full of a lot more generally advertiser-friendly content. And then they'd mix it with streaming television and it would present as a neat, sterilized version of social networking video upload reality that would be safe for the masses who could continue to think everything's fine, like they did during the Obama years. Voices of dissent would be gone, and it would appear that they died out relatively naturally, one by one, because they were bad apples that couldn't keep up with the progressive modern society that we are living in. Or postmodern, sorry. It would look to the average drone of an American citizen that they were seemingly trying to socially engineer that the censored version of reality was all there was to YouTube, when in fact, there was an entire big corner of YouTube that had been censored. Whatever type of deals Democratic Party Incorporated had made with Google are something that were probably beneficial to both corporations, because that's what deals are. So we can assume Google was willing to sacrifice certain amounts of YouTube viewer happiness for whatever DNC Incorporated was offering them when Clinton were to get into office. But of course, that's not what happened. Not at all. Clinton lost spectacularly to Donald Trump, and while DNC Incorporated definitely attempted to get their power back, they weren't exactly smooth about it and discredited any legitimate claim to the throne that they might have had by showing that they weren't even attempting to be fair about democracy. Clinton went down tooth and nail to the bitter end like a Disney villain dying, and everybody saw her for what she truly is. So where does that leave YouTube? Well, personally, I think that they didn't know what to do at first at all. I imagine that they were wondering if somehow the Democrats would steal the power back from Trump, just like everybody else was. Then they might have legitimately considered just nuking all of YouTube because it was an unprofitable pain in the ass at that point anyway. They might have hoped that it wouldn't matter if they nuked it because maybe everybody would stop caring about what all of the big content creators had to say after a few months. Nobody would care what Sargon of Akkad has to say after a few months, right? However, Google realized that nuking YouTube was a bad idea because that would look bad, and they already had too many contracts with content creators for YouTube Red and stuff, so they couldn't just nuke it. And also, they knew that the popular content creators wouldn't just cease to exist, and it would look super bad if they tried to silence them because they'd find a new platform where taking down Google is a major part of the agenda. At which point, Google decided that they had to proceed with the prior plan of making money with YouTube by moving more towards streaming. But in order to do that, they needed to re-engineer the way advertising matched up with content to ensure that it was actually profitable, which is something that I am not entirely sure they cared about when the game plan included their contract with Democratic Party Incorporated, which the Democrats ended up terminating when Clinton lost. Sorry, I mean, the contract was automatically terminated because the contract was predicated on the notion that Clinton was going to win. For a bit of context, I don't think companies like CNN and the New York Times are even profitable businesses without the help of Democratic Party Incorporated. I don't think that they actually make money. I think that they are given money. but I have a feeling that Google is every bit as powerful as the Democrats. And I think even YouTube knows that if they played their cards right, they could be a profitable business. Because although there is a lot of expenses, in terms of channels that nobody watches, there is also a massive viewership and massive advertising. That said, I think that the changes that we are currently undergoing are actually the aftermath of what happened when Google cut its ties with the Democratic Party Incorporated, and then tried to recalibrate their advertising contracts and changed the standards a bit for what is considered advertiser friendly so that they could eventually make money. Something that they have to do ever so often anyway. But here's where the theory gets fun. The Democrats, being the pathetically arrogant motley crew of cultural manipulators that they are, tried to seek vengeance upon YouTube for cutting them off by way of getting their media monkeys at places like the Wall Street Journal and in the blogosphere to launch smear campaigns towards YouTube personalities like PewDiePie, even calling in a few favors from ties that they have with places like Disney. However, like a small dog on a leash, which is the Wall Street Journal as compared to PewDiePie, the bark was a lot louder than any bite, and their attack on PewDiePie ultimately was just something that made them look pathetic. They were bluffing, and like PewDiePie said, he's still here. And while his contract with YouTube Red might have been canceled, they did not kick him off the platform entirely because why would they? Like I said at the beginning of this video, YouTube and Google are not as stupid as it might seem from their actions. There are probably a few SJWs working for the company, but there's probably all sorts of awesome people who value freedom of speech, and those people are yelling at the SJWs of YouTube every day in meetings, saying that they signed up to work for the company because they saw it as the democratization of all media. I realize that it sounds like I'm sucking YouTube's dick here, but I want to believe that this is the truth. YouTube is a company that people wanted to work for when they started their jobs there, during a different political climate, and these are not inherently bad, stupid, or brainwashed people. There's just a lot of factors at play here. YouTube knows that the content creators that have made themselves famous here are branded with marketing that could stand on its own on any platform. So there is no point in any gradual takedown of all of our separate channels. We'd host elsewhere if we had to build it ourselves, and for every bigger channel that got nuked, a smaller one would tell the story. They'd have to nuke us all at once, but if they were going to do that, they'd have to already have done it, or they'd have to know who to nuke and who knows too much, which there is no way of knowing. Like I said, too many people are red-pilled. It's too late for this type of censorship. PewDiePie could probably sponsor an entire video streaming site and blow YouTube out of the water if they gave him a good enough reason, and I'm sure he knows that. Maybe the only reason things are seeming haphazard and like we are at war with YouTube and Google itself is hopefully because the Democratic Party, the lowlife snakes that they are, have undoubtedly taken to lobbying individual advertising companies, loading their imaginations up with certain buzzwords that are supposedly hate speech. For example, if a Democrat somehow arranges for somebody to have a meeting with a CEO of a cereal company that advertises on YouTube, they could bring a clip of PewDiePie's Nazi jokes and maybe the worst splices of Sargon of Akkad's offensive humor, claiming to the CEO that these people are all putting forth hate speech. They could tell this CEO of the cereal company that anybody who talks about social justice warriors, or SJWs as we put it, should not be considered advertiser friendly. And then the Democratic Party's person would urge the CEO to call up YouTube and tell them that they don't want their products associated with channels that talk about SJWs. And if YouTube gets enough of those calls, videos that feature SJW in the title or the tags might get demonetized. That is a realistic scenario, and the Democrats would totally do that. You see, now that Google and the Democrats are no longer officially in bed with each other, the only chance that the Democrats have to get their gigantic cultural media narrative back is to attack the reputations of YouTube personalities melodramatically, which is really just a bluff, and then they'll slyly meddle with advertisers as if advertisers won't figure out the game soon enough, which they will. Ultimately, advertisers just want to make money, and they will want to advertise on YouTube just so long as they are aware that their ads aren't showing up on channels with Nazi content. And people legitimately believe that there is actually all sorts of Nazi content on YouTube thanks to a last-ditch effort smear campaign from the mainstream Democratic corporate media. But that smear campaign has hopefully already failed, and the corporate politicians probably know it, but just don't know what to do next. Advertisers will figure out that they've been lied to soon enough, though it definitely couldn't hurt to start a few petitions so that we can let them know that their audience sees through this bullshit, so that they can happily go back to making money like they want to. Furthermore, people will figure out how to bypass the easily surmountable hurdle of having to sign into their accounts as adults so that they can view everything on YouTube. That part isn't the end of the world, but is rather just a kink YouTube will have to iron out as they partner with corporate studios, because those guys have different ways of doing things. The bottom line is that more and more people are learning about the amazing content that they are missing out on from alternative media YouTube content creators every day. And that is the main thing that YouTube really has going for it that nowhere else does. YouTube is sitting on a gold mine, so if they haven't figured out a way to turn that into a real profit, they'll figure it out soon enough, I hope. There will be a point where the Democratic Party admits defeat for now and that they are forced to go back to the drawing board. But they probably won't admit it outwardly. They'll likely just start being quiet and let businesses advertise on YouTube as they wish without fear-mongering them. And eventually channels will go back to doing whatever they want to do, be it play games or bitch about feminists. But even more than that, the biggest lesson learned from the 2016 elections was that the influence of skeptic, centrist, libertarian, and conservative new media working together is not to be underestimated. Our collective organized chaos refines ideas into theories and theories into relative proof so quickly that not a think tank or multi-billion-dollar political propaganda machine can keep up with us. And in a lot of ways, we are just getting started. We've shown that if our entire ship is threatened, we can begin figuring out what is needed to build a new one. And by the way, I have started uploading videos to minds.com. That said, we are many, and our combined intellect cannot be met with anything less than transparency that is mutually agreed upon by the collective. And I really hope that Google has figured this out by now. In many ways, although it might seem like we are under the threat of being shut down as a whole, we also serve to be a good safety precaution for national and international politics. Because if it gets to the point where Donald Trump or any other such thing presents any significant and immediate problem, we'll be the first on the beat, because that is precisely what we do. Unless, of course, Google finds itself firmly aligned with supporting Trump, which it might. Or maybe I'm completely wrong about all of this because I have noticed just today that I couldn't find advertising basically anywhere on YouTube, which I have no great way to explain. Perhaps I am assigning logic to something that is inherently illogical or has forces powering it that are so Machiavellian and ruthless that they do not care about what millions and millions of internet users actually think. And we will be shut down for good sooner than later. In which case, user outcry won't really be all that much help because they obviously have some rather creepy plans for us. If that is the case, it has been an honor serving with you, my YouTube community, and I hope we can do it again in my lifetime.